Hey guys, welcome back. Today I'm recording on my camera, so it's a little bit different. And also, we're going to be changing the topic up a little bit. So the last two videos I've been talking about emotional intelligence, but today I would like to talk to you about developmental psychology. So the science of developmental psychology is about how humans grow, change, and sometimes stay exactly the same across a lifetime. And this is just one of those topics that isn't just isn't just a science. I mean, it is a science, but it doesn't just live in textbook. It relates to you, your family, your friends, everyone. So during this video, we're going to explore how biology and environment work together to shape who we are. The big old nature versus nurture debate, which we're going to get right into. So, how scientists figure out what's driving change and the myths that we've been told that you may not hold up under scrutiny, so you may believe this. You'll also hear stories, research findings, and examples you can relate to your own experiences. So before we start, let's think back on your own childhood. What's one thing about you that has stayed completely the same? You got it? And what's another that you think has changed beyond recognition? So keep those two things in mind because they'll come back later. Let's start. Developmental psychology is a scientific study of how we grow, learn, and change over time. When most people hear the term, they picture children and toddlers, but this field covers the entire lifespan, from before we're born right through the final stages of life. And one of the most important ideas in developmental psychology is that it's not just about what changes, it's also about how changes. How fast those changes can happen, sorry. The rate of change is often the most telling part of the story. So, for example, think about height. We grow rapidly in early childhood and the pace slows through adolescence. Then it stops altogether in adulthood. Or vocabulary, it starts slow, then there's an explosion of words almost at around age 2, and after that it grows steadily as we read and interact with others. Executive function, which is our ability to plan, prioritize, and control impulses, this takes even longer to develop, well until our mid-20s. So our brains aren't actually fully formed until around 24, according to research. And developmental psychology is also a team effort. So it's not just about psychology itself in isolation. You'd be surprised that it draws also on genetics, which gives us the biological blueprint. Biology, which tracks physical changes, cognitive science, which studies how we think and learn, perception science, which explores how we interpret the world, and even history and philosophy, which shape our ideas about human nature. When you understand that development is this layered, interconnected process, it stops being a list of milestones and becomes a story. Your story, my story, and everyone's story. So, it's tempting to think that developmental psychology is only about change. After all, the term development sounds like a forward motion. But here's a twist, it's also about stability. Some trait sticks with us our entire lives. I once knew two brothers. As kids, one was very adventurous, always climbing trees and jumping off fences, while the other one was cautious, preferring books and puzzles. 20 years later, nothing's really changed. The adventurous one became a travel photographer, and the cautious one became an accountant. The details of their lives were different, but the core temperaments exactly the same. This is why developmental psychologists study not just the shifts and transformations, but also the enduring threads, the constants that shape how the rest of the development unfolds. Now, we come to the most famous debate in psychology, nature versus nurture. Nature refers to the qualities we are born with, our genes, our DNA, the innate biological wiring that sets certain potentials in motion. Think about how easily children pick up language. They don't need formal lessons to start speaking. In most cases. I'm sure there's other cases as well, but it's something humans are wired to do. Or, nurture, on the other hand, is everything that comes from experience. The people we meet, the culture we live in, the way we're raised. This is a world of learning, reinforcement, and social influence. It's where behaviorists like John B. Watson, B.F. Skinner made their mark, showing how rewards and consequences can shape our behavior. Historically, the pendulum has swung between these two extremes. Early 20th century psychology leaned heavily towards biological determinism, the idea that our genes set our destiny, while mid-century behaviorism pushed back, arguing that the right environment could mold anyone into anything. But today, the consensus is clear. It's not one or the other. Nature and nurture are partners in a complex dance. Our genes set potentials, but your environments decide how, when, and if those potentials are expressed. One concept that often trips people up is heritability. It's not the same as how inherited something is. Instead, it's a way of asking how much of the variation in a trait across a population is due to genetic differences in the population. Sounds like a mouthful, but let me explain. Imagine two different societies. In the first, everyone has plenty of food and medical care. In that society, height differences are mostly explained by genetics. High heritability. In the second society, malnutrition is common. Their environment plays a much bigger role, and heritability is lower. So as you can see, it's like heritability is like a seesaw, which shows the variation of genetic factors and environmental factors. And the more equal the environment, the more genetics will explain the differences you see. The more unequal environment, the more it takes center stage in shaping outcomes. So this is why twin studies are so valuable. Identical twins raised apart often show striking similarities in personality, suggesting strong genetic influence, yet they also differ in ways that reveal the environment's power. So how do we measure development? Measuring development is a challenge. You can't always run controlled experiments on people's lives. So researchers get a bit creative. Some watch behavior directly, either in natural settings or controlled lab environments, while others ask people to report on themselves using questionnaires. Parents and teachers are often asked to give their perspective on a child's behavior, and clinical interviews can dig deep into personal histories, while public records also offer data on larger populations. Each method has its strengths and weaknesses, such as self-reports, for example, can be colored by memory or bias. Our memory isn't actually that great, but that's a topic for another day. Observations can be expensive and time-consuming. That's why researchers often use more than one method to build a fuller, more reliable picture of what's happening. Excuse me. And now let's get into the myths and misconceptions. There are some persistent myths about development that needs clearing up. The first is the idea that genes dictate everything. I mean, this is a pretty common idea, right? People love to put everything in genes, and this is how I was brought up. This is just my brain. This is my parents. This is inherited. But the first idea that genes dictate everything, in reality, genes set possibilities, not certainties. Let's repeat it again. Genes set possibilities, not certainties. A genetic disorder like PKU, for example, can lead to disability, but only if it's not treated. Yet, with the right diet, symptoms can be prevented almost entirely. The second is the blank slate myth, the idea that we're born as an empty vessel and learn everything from experience. We know that infants come into the world with preferences, reflexes, and even early personality traits. So the idea that we're just a blank slate waiting for, I don't know if you guys have heard of it, a blank slate just waiting for the world to fill us up, that's not entirely right either. Another myth is that if a trait is highly heritable, the environment doesn't matter. This is just simply not true, according to research. Intelligence, for instance, is highly heritable, but can be influenced by schooling, nutrition, and stimulation. And finally, there's the misconception that genetics tells us the course. knowing that something runs in families doesn't necessarily explain how it develops. So for that, we need to understand mechanisms, not just correlations. And so, what's the takeaway from all this? Development is a dynamic interplay of biology, environment, and choice. It's not fixed, and that means change is always possible. So the next time you hear someone say, it's just genetics, or it's just how you're raised, you'll know that it's never that simple. You'll ask, what's the evidence? How is it measured? And what's the bigger picture? By thinking critically, you will just understand human development better. You also navigate your own growth, the growth of those around you, and insight and compassion. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.